Sorry, we're a little bit late, but we're gonna have something very interesting to talk about. So today I'm going to talk about the natural alternative ADHD treatment, the same exact protocol that I talk about or um, mentioned in my book. Um, if you have my book, is that's exactly what I talk about. The reason why I want to talk about that is when I go into a Facebook group, I get a lot of questions about or people asking about like different kind of things, what helps and whatnot. But what I notice is, hi, what I notice is that, um, sorry, what I notice is that people often think that, oh yeah, I don't like to try medication, or I don't like to put my kids on medication. So what they think that is that, okay, instead of medication, maybe there's another type of natural solution. And I think most people think that the other natural solution is maybe a pill, another pill form that will work. But actually, when it comes to natural alternative treatment, it's basically anything that doesn't fall into the conventional medical realm of things. So, like, not a medication that is made by a pharmaceutical company or without involving surgery or anything like that. So, knowing that, then we know that basically anything that makes your ADHD symptoms, yours or your child's ADHD symptoms better, will be considered as an alternative treatment. So inside my book, and again, me as a registered dietitian, of course, I always focus on the nutrition because, and I'll explain all of that to you later. Um, but my background is that I'm a pediatric dietitian, so I work with a lot of children. I see a lot of the things that most people do not see, even as adult dietitians. So I see a lot of a lot of kids with special needs, very rare genetic disorder, and basically my background is a little bit unique because of being a pediatric dietitian and have to understand a lot of rare genetic disorder. And the reason that I focus on the nutrition is that if you think about it, food is really not just food, right? So we have to think of food differently. And when people think of a natural alternative ADHD treatment, they often think that, oh yeah, maybe there's some herbs and stuff that I can just take, or like some other stuff. But from my perspective, I always start from the very beginning, which is nutrition, right? Like if your parents out there, you remember the day when you find out that you're pregnant. What is the first thing or first few things that you do, right? When you find out you're pregnant, most likely the first few things that you do is you change your diet, right? You change your diet, make sure that you eat really well, eat really clean. All the junk food that you used to crave, you try to avoid them as much as possible. So as human beings, we internally and innately knows that nutrition is very important. But then I guess over time, when we're not focusing on our health, we just eat whatever way we want. But we know when we're pregnant, we're like, oh my God, I need to make sure that I have enough. I'm eating the right food. I have to avoid certain food that might harm my baby. So we know nutrition is important, even from the very beginning, before, not really before, but right at the beginning where life is formed. So that's something to remember. And that's where um, I kind of started this whole thing is that, hey, when you're trying to treat someone with ADHD, we know that a lot of the ADHD symptoms, the very classic ADHD symptoms, is like lack of focus, not able to calm down, poor memory. So all of those were focusing on the brain function, right? So let's just focus on all the brain function first. So, with knowing that, okay, if most of the symptoms, the classic symptoms of ADHD is not able to focus, have poor memory, is not able to calm down or sit down still. So, we're thinking of the brain. So, a lot of times, I think in the disease models nowadays, or maybe not, I think some of the doctors also have not helping either, is that we often think that disease just happened to us. It's like you just wake up one day and you have this disease. But then we need to start asking deeper, right? Like a lot of you are here because you want to avoid ADHD medication. And the reason most of you is that because there's so many um, unpleasant side effects associated with ADHD medication. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. And that's for most of us the main reason why. And it's for me it's the same reason as well. Like I said, I'm a pediatric dietitian. I've seen a lot of the kids in the hospital. I've seen the side effects of this medication, what it does to the child, and all of those things. And that's one of the many reasons why I start writing this book, doing my own research. But going back, even um, pharmaceutical company will tell you that, oh yeah, you with ADHD is because you have a brain chemical imbalance or you have a low level of certain brain chemicals, specifically dopamine, right? So then that was the reason for them to persuade you that you need their drugs for the rest of your life because they're like, oh yeah, you're born with this brain chemical imbalance, this is you're not making enough. So that was the reasoning. And ADHD is not the only thing that they say that they have the same reasoning for people with depression, anxiety, or any kind of um, mental illnesses. They said is a brain chemical imbalance. But I think us as consumer, we need to ask smarter question, right? Like why is the brain chemical low? And why is it suddenly, right? The thing is they um, people often think that oh you have the gene, you're born with it. And my thought is if you're born with it, then you should have ADHD like the first day that you're born, right? Or when someone say oh yeah you have the obese gene and you're born with it, so that means that you would have started out as a chubby baby right from the get-go, like a 9 pounds 10 pound babies when you're born, because that's in your gene, right? So that means that no matter what happened, you will still be fat and overweight. But that's not the case. It's not genes, it's epigenetics. And but anyway, going back to like asking smarter question is we need to ask smarter questions. Why is your brain chemical low? Why is your brain chemical imbalance? And what most people don't think about is we just think that oh yeah, the brain chemicals kind of like this magic dust that is circulating in our brain and it just happens to be there, right? But no, everything that you have on your body, every time you touch your hair, touch your face, touch anything on your body that you can touch, everything that is on your body comes from the food that you eat. And for a newborn baby that just came into this world, all of that baby came from the food that the mom eats. So we need to start digging deeper, like, oh yeah, so what happened, right? So, and again, I'm not trying to say that the only reason why you have a low brain chemicals is because of malnutrition. There are tons and tons of other reasons that you can have a low brain chemicals. And also remember that your brain chemicals um, level. So number one, the most basic reason for all human beings is from the food that we eat, right? So our food, whatever we eat in our diet, we need the specific type of amino acid to create each and single every one of those brain chemicals. So that's number one. So that's an ingredients issue or supply chain issue. And number two is the process. It's the factory making the brain chemicals, right? So we have to look at, oh, do I have the right mechanism? And this is more along the line of the genetic part. Are you born when you're born? Do you have the right receptors? Do you have the right process to make all of those? So that's more the genetic side. But then but you have to have the factory, then you have to have the ingredients, and then you have to have the right process. It's kind of like creating a recipe or baking a cake, right? You have to have the right ingredients and then the right equipment, the right oven to provide all of that. So that's kind of where the nutrition part came from. And then the other thing, so um, let me just go quickly review the 4 steps that I talk about inside my book. So the first step in the book is the elimination diet, where you eliminate any mm, any kind of food or ingredients that could trigger some of the or trigger or worsen the ADHD symptoms. So there's usually a lot of processed food that have a lot of man-made products, food additives, food colorings, and also potential hidden food intolerances as well. So that's the elimination part of the eat to focus protocol. And then step number two, or phase number two, is feeding the ADHD brain. So now I just described how if your brain have a low brain chemicals, we can actually help to change that, and I'll explain that. Number three, or step number three, is to heal the leaky gut, because a lot of times kids with ADHD or even kids with autism tend to have a lot of GI problem or gastrointestinal symptoms. So we will try to fix as much of that as possible, because our intestine actually makes a lot of the brain chemicals that helps us calm down. And then step number four, I can do number four like that. Number four is brain reboot, doing activities and yeah, mostly activities and things that helps to reroute the brain connection. Because if your brain is so used to being not focused, out of being hyperactive, thinking in like a different loopy way, then we have to rewire all that. And there's very specific exercise and activities to do that. But we'll talk about a little bit of everything today. So going back, let's see, number one, let's just be a little bit more methodical here. So just start with number one. So the elimination diet. A lot of people kind of freaked out when they think of elimination, like, oh my God, you have to take off that out. Just understand that there's the difference between food and nutrients. So human being needs nutrients to survive. And nutrients, we're talking about carbohydrate, protein, fats, water, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So those are the nutrients that our human body needs. When it comes to food, food is just the form of things that we ingest to acquire those seven essential nutrients that our body needs. So that when you understand that better now, so that means that we can eliminate a lot of the food as long as we get all of those seven nutrients that our body needs in. So the purpose of the elimination diet is actually twofold. Number one is to eliminate food that potentially can trigger some kind of adverse reaction in the body. So, like again, we all have the same seven nutrients needs, but the way we acquire it is all different. Like some people who have celiac disease or cow's milk protein allergy, they will not be able to get the protein or get the carbs and the protein from, like someone with cow's milk allergy, they wouldn't get the carbohydrate and protein or calcium from cow's milk product, because cow's milk causes allergic reaction to them, so they cannot get that. So they have to get the carbs and protein from other sources of food that they don't react to. And for someone with celiac disease, they will not be able to get the carbohydrate from any bread, pasta, or things like that. But they can get it from things like potatoes or rice or fruits or beans to get the carbohydrate from. So that's what I'm trying to explain to you in the elimination diet. So, so the first purpose of the elimination diet is to is to eliminate things that could potentially trigger or worsen some of the ADHD symptoms. Another thing that we also know a lot about is that food colorings and a lot of other man-made food additives can trigger behavioral reaction in the body. So we're going also as well remove a lot of the processed factory food from the diet. And and I know a lot of parents get paranoid, like, oh my God, you have to take off that food out. Like, can we just do a food allergy test first to see what the child is reacting to? The thing is, with a lot of these, like kids with special needs, like autism, seizure, ADHD, a lot of times they're not actually allergic to the food. When when we're talking about allergic, um, and actually show up in the blood test, it has to trigger and the actual allergic IgE mediated allergic reaction. That will be the only kind of reaction that will show up on the test. But if it's some kind of more of an um, irritation or things like that, it's not going to show up on the test. That's why, like, I don't trust a lot of the food allergy tests that much. Like, like even for myself, I have done all the food allergy tests out there, but I know I'm allergic to a few food because every time I eat those food, it upset me. But it's more of an intolerance, kind of like lactose intolerance. So, like when you have lactose intolerance, you are intolerant to the sugar in milk, and it's not because you're allergic to it. Because if you ask the doctor, oh, can every time I drink milk, it makes me feel bloated, I have diarrhea. Can you test me for? And then when the doctor run all the allergy tests, everything's gonna come back negative because when you drink milk, it did not trigger an allergic reaction. Your The cause of that bloating and diarrhea from drinking milk for you is because your body is missing an enzymes that breaks down milk sugar. So that's the cause of your reaction to milk. It's not an allergic reaction. So that's something we need to understand. And a lot of this reaction to food, there's no test to. There might be a few, but very, very specific. So if you're allergic to something very obscure and not usually tested, you will get a negative result and you'll be like, oh my god, what's wrong with me? Like, I swear god, every time I eat this I just don't feel good, or I break out in hives, or my child turned into a little evil, or cry every night and can't sleep at night. And it happens a lot, and I see that a lot in my clinic. And the reason why I see a lot of this is because when the child or the person go see the doctor and say, hey, I think I'm allergic to this, and then they did all the tests, run all the tests, everything comes back negative, nothing's wrong with the thing, with the child or the person, the doctor will end up saying something like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with you, like all the tests come back all clean and negative, maybe it's all in your head. And then you get so upset because you're like, why you tell me that? Like, I know my body, something's wrong with my body, why you tell me that I'm making this up? Why are you telling me that I'm wasting resources? So that the doctor get frustrated, patient get frustrated. So the doctor's last resort is usually send them to the dietitian. And this is where I help them figure out that they're sensitive to certain food. And that's when we figure out what food is causing the problem, they felt so much better and like, oh my god, I finally figure out what is wrong with me. Like we've been seeing all these doctors all this time and can't find any solution. So, and I have many stories like that to tell, but today I'm kind of short on time, so I'm not gonna be able to share a lot of these stories. But you can go back to like I have a video a couple weeks ago on food allergy or food sensitivity or intolerance and ADHD. That's where I talk a lot about this. And here's what I have a question. Yep. So the name of my book is Eat to Focus. You can there might be a link inside the Facebook group or on Amazon. It's on Amazon right now too. So yeah, so that's number one is the elimination diet. Oh yeah, so I mentioned. Excuse me, I'm coughing a little bit today. Um, so the number one purpose is to identify food that can actually or worsen the ADHD symptoms or triggers those symptoms. And then the second thing is to help you identify what causes it. So I guess they're the same thing. Oh wait, so number one reason is really eliminate food that cause or trigger symptoms. So it's kind of like part the helping you feel better. And then the second reason is to identify what's causing the problem. Okay, there's another question here. Yes, actually, the question is, do you believe the Mediterranean cuisine is the healthiest in the world? Actually, that's to me, the Mediterranean diet is the maintenance diet. So in my book, That's why, like, I think people get confused because I often talk about like how some of the healthiest stuff, like the beans and nuts and eggs, some of those I talk about eliminating those from the diet. That's is part when you do the elimination diet, that is part of the eat to focus protocol. And inside the elimination diet, when we're doing the eat to focus thing, that phase one, you eliminate all the grains products, so like the rice, the couscous, quinoa, pasta, bread, and things like that. You eliminate all the grains, um, nuts and seeds, not seeds, nuts, eggs, and dairy. So those are all the things to avoid because those are the very, very common um, food that either trigger an allergic reaction or trigger or make the symptoms worse. And then, so you do that, you eliminate all those food for about 1 or 2 months. And then when the symptoms, you notice the symptoms get significantly better, then you introduce some of the food back. And the reintroduction phase is kind of individualized. I don't dictate that, but I usually tell my patient or the parents to actually start with the food that your child or you miss the most. Because usually what I realize is that the food that you eat the most and crave the most in your usual life is usually the food that is causing problem. So I'll always ask them to start by introducing those food first. And even if you introduce those food, it doesn't mean that if you have a reaction, you have to avoid those food forever. Because remember, if if you have a reaction to food, it is not an allergic reaction. Like someone eats shrimp and the whole face swelled up. It's not the same thing. It's an intolerance. So that means that you might be able to eat a small amount of that problem food and still be okay. But then if you eat a lot, then you might have an issue with that. So like in my case, I have a gluten intolerance, but that doesn't mean that I don't eat bread or cookies or things like that forever. I still eat it, but I just need to know that I have a tolerance to that. So that means that I cannot have gluten 3 meals straight in a row because my belly's going to dislike me for a while, right? And even rice, and I noticed over the years, even rice give me problems. So I have to know that I can only eat those things in small portion in a meal. So if I ever eat rice in a meal, it'll be just like a tiny little golf ball size amount the whole meal. Or if I eat anything like bread or things like that, it'll be a very small portion out of the meal, and it'll be only like once every couple of months that I have those items. So it's just part of it. The second phase of that elimination diet is really like helping you or helping the parent to understand their body in a certain way, knowing what the tolerance is, how much you can tolerate, what foods is causing issue and stuff. And like I don't eat anything with red dye in it because that's like the ones that I see the most common that turns kids wild, like is the red dye. And um, and you might have heard me talk about this before, and it's in the book. Food coloring. Avoid anything that has food coloring in it. Is food coloring is banned in Europe, and but in the U.S. it is still legal. They're still putting like all this red dye, whatever colorings in the food. But from my own experience as a pediatric dietitian, red dye is like the number one that I see a lot of times. Kids come with the parents like, oh my god, like we avoid red coloring completely. So red coloring or any food coloring at all. But just to summarize, that elimination diet phase is basically eliminating a lot of the processed food and the common food allergens or common food that people react to. So it's like all the whole grains. So someone asked a question about how about oatmeal. So oatmeal will be eliminated as well. And you're like, but it's so healthy. Yes. So all the grains. So again, it's just a temporary thing. You eliminate for about a month or two, and then and the thing is you don't have to be 100% clean. Like I tell people all the time, like we often have this black or white all or nothing mentality. Things, even if you do that elimination diet, just 50% of the time, you still get 50% benefit, better 50% better than what you're now, right? And then it might just take you a little bit longer. Maybe instead of um, seeing better results in 1 to 2 months, you might just do it for a long time. Just do it for a whole year, and just try to avoid those food as much as possible. And then eventually you realize that, oh, you know what, I gave up. I'm not gonna have that ever again. And that's kind of um, my story too. When I first realized that I have a gluten intolerance, like that was many years ago, over 10 years ago, before I understand all this like functional nutrition stuff. Because as a conventionally trained dietitian, we're like, oh yeah, pasta is good for you. Whole grain pasta, whole wheat bread, just eat those, right? But then when that was like probably about 10 years ago, and I was like, why is my stomach always hurting? I don't get it. And then, and what that's back then when I used to cook alternating. One day we'll have rice, one day we'll have bread, and I always get this like really healthy whole grain bread, right? And I was like, every couple of days, my belly just hurts so bad, right? Oh yeah, we have bread and pasta and rice. So like all the things that a conventional dietitian will tell you, oh yeah, those things are so healthy, you should eat them all the time. And I was like, my belly just hurts every couple of days. I can't figure out why. And then after a while, I start associating that like, okay, it seems like every time I eat this whole grain bread, it really bothers me, and my stomach hurts really bad on those days I eat the bread. So then I start experimenting. I was like, okay, let me take the bread out from my diet for a while, and then I start feeling better, right? So I was like, okay, that's interesting. But then still I don't understand that whole functional nutrition thing right back then. I was like, okay, whatever. So then I'll go back to my eating old habit, like eating bread and pasta like any other registered dietitian would, right? And then after a while, it's like, okay, definitely it's the bread. But then that still didn't persuade me, right? I was like, okay, it's the bread. So let me just not eat bread for a couple of months, right? Then I was like, okay, good. I'm feeling better now. So it's definitely the bread, but I still don't believe it. It took me 5 years to finally like throw in the towel. I was like, you know what? I definitely have a gluten intolerance, and I don't want to deal with that anymore. Because even that back and forth, eliminating and putting it back in without fully healing, like I get to the point that eating bread just makes me want to throw up. So I just like, no, I don't want it. So like every time I think about bread, smell bread, I just feel nauseated. So I finally give up. So but like I said, I still eat occasionally some cookies or sandwiches, but sandwiches is not my go-to thing. But yeah, so your body eventually will tell you, and we just need to listen to our body, right? So okay, step number two inside the ET focus is let me think. What's number two? Oh yeah, number two is feeding the brain, right? So we know classic ADHD symptoms is you're not able to focus, and yes, I'll give you a list of that because if you look back, um, the question is, can you give us a list of food that is healthy to eat? Like if you look back on um, maybe a couple weeks ago, I have a post on Instagram that talks about that, show you the whole list, so you can find that. But I'll I'll also kind of quickly go over the list with you here. So the classic symptoms of ADHD is lack of focus, poor memories, forgetting things, and also being impulsive. So we need to find out. So in the very beginning of today, I talk about how the depleted um, brain chemicals. So going back to the brain chemicals, so brain chemicals are actually protein molecules in the body. So knowing that they're protein molecules, that means that we need to make sure that in our diet, we have to have a higher protein diet. So protein as in healthy protein from animal source. So the very specific protein, so here's the list of all the food that will help boost the brain chemicals in your body. So number one is organic um, animal protein. So it could be beef, pork, chicken, fish, seafood, eggs, any kind of animal protein, organic source is the best because if you take something that is from the conventionally farmed animal, there's a lot of chemicals and antibiotics in the feed, so we want to avoid those as much as possible because when we ingest the animal protein that are fed on those things, we're actually acquiring the antibiotics, the growth hormones, and like the pesticides of those things that the animal eat. So we want the organic one as much as possible. And sometimes, and people often complain that, oh, that is so expensive. Think of it as your medication. Food is your medication, okay? So think of it that way. You either pay more in your organic food or you're going to be paying the pharmaceutical company. So you pay either way. So choose wisely. Number two is organ meat. So organ meat, I'm talking about things like liver, hearts, and I don't know, that's the only two that I will eat. So, oh, actually, you can also do chicken feet or bone marrow and things like that. The reason why you want to have the organ meat is because they're rich in glycine or collagen. Collagen is like the glue in your body. Like all the tissues that you have, your brain tissue, body tissue, muscle tissue, organ tissue, requires collagen to glue all the things together. And that's not just good for the organ function, but also good for your intestine, the leaky gut. The reason why it's called leaky gut and you really want to like really treat your gut really good is because the intestine is just one single layer of cells. Like our skin, like you know how sometimes you cut yourself, but there's still there are many layers of skin. Like I can't remember, but in your skin there are many different layers because the skin is exposed to the outside environment. So it's thicker, have more layers of skin tissue, but your intestine only have one layer. So if you eat something that is irritating to your intestine and like do like a little scrap on your intestine, that opens up a gap. And when that gap's open, anything goes into it. Bacteria, virus, fungus, whatever can go into it, or partially digested food can go through that tiny little gap and cause problem. So yeah, so the intestine is very delicate. So yeah, let's continue with the list. So the first one I mentioned is organic animal protein. Um, well, today I don't have much time because something happened today, so I that's why I'm late and I really need to go. But um, but I'll definitely make share a post in there. So number one, organic protein, and yeah, that's why I'm not going to fight with people who are vegan out there. I'll talk about vegan later. So organic animal protein. Number two will be organ meat. So like I said, it sounds really gross, but it's liver, hearts, bone marrow, and chicken feet. And yeah, or you can, if you just don't like those, just do a collagen protein powder. And the ones that I usually use, I don't have a bottle here with me, is the Vital Proteins. That's the one that I use. And that's the one I recommend for my patient as well. And then number three, vegetables. You know how people often hear, and you probably hear that a lot too, is food is your let food be thy medicine from Hippocrates. So when Hippocrates said that, he didn't realize how much our food have changed. But I think when Hippocrates talk about food is your medicine, he's talking about vegetables. And that's why I tell all my patients, like, if you want to lose weight, if you want to feel better, think better, you really have to eat vegetables. There's no way around without vegetables. So vegetables are filled with vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So they're basically your multivitamin in a form of food. So definitely eat your vegetables. And then not so much fruit. Fruit should be looked at more as a dessert than something that you snack on all day long because of the fructose in it. Um, and then what else? Um, and then nuts and seeds. Yeah, the healthy fats. And oh yeah, healthy fats. That's what it is. Perfect. You love vegetables. Yeah, we should all love vegetables. The thing is that um, I tell my patient all the time, vegetables again because if you look at vegetable as a medicine, I think it's easier to swallow, right? Because most medicine doesn't taste good anyway. So If you think of it that way, that's that kind of the reason why vegetables doesn't taste good because it's not meant to. No, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, vegetable just doesn't taste good because it's a medicine. But that doesn't mean that you have to suffer through the yucky taste of the vegetables. You can always make it taste really good. You just have to hide it. Like that's something that I talk about all the time is the only way to make vegetables taste good is that you don't taste it. So turn it into stuff. Like salad tastes the best is when you chop up all the vegetable and put a really good um, natural dressing on it. The other way to do it is like chop up different kind of vegetables or tomatoes and make a salsa with it, or you can make spinach dip, or you can cook the vegetables in a stew with meat so the vegetable just absorb all the flavor from the meat. And don't worry about that. The vegetable is cooked. Like some people think that you have to eat the vegetable raw to get most of the benefit, but to me, some people just cannot tolerate raw vegetable. The cooking process is part of the digestion. When you cook something, it actually helps break some of the tissue down, making the food easier to digest. Especially for people or with kids who have like a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms, like when you have those symptoms like stomach pain, diarrhea, constipation, it's signs that your body telling you that hey, the digestion is not working well. Then don't put more raw vegetables in there. Like even for me, have my digestion is not good. Every time I eat a so-called healthy diet with a lot of raw vegetables, I just don't feel good. So for me, eating cooked vegetables work. You might not get all the benefit, but if it helps you absorb your food better and not cause any pain to you, then just eat the cooked ones. But if you can eat the raw vegetables with no problem, go for it too, because that's how your body works. So we need to understand that I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just telling you do what works for you. Okay, good. You enjoy both raw and cooked. Psychologically, I feel better when eating vegetables. Yeah, that's really true. Like the reason why you feel psychologically feel better when you eat vegetables is because your vegetables are full of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. And most people, that's the problem with nowadays is we're so focused on the calories that we don't think about food as medicine. And the thing is, all these things, the vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, the reason why we need those is because our body is actually run on biochemistry. And all of these vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants are like keys that turns on this reaction. So when you're just focusing on counting calories, just eating all this junk food all day long that have no vitamins, minerals, or antioxidant, you're just putting calories in, but then you don't have the keys to turn this reaction on to use those calories. And that's how a lot of people become overweight, even though they're counting calories every day, is you're missing the keys. And and again, I see that all the time when I have my patients start eating more vegetables, like in their diet, just adding more vegetables. Every single one of them come back and tell me, oh my God, I have so much more energy and I can think so much better. Just know that vegetables have a place and have a purpose in our diet. And then, okay, I think we just get through number two. So number three, so I have to get through number three and four really quickly because I really need to go. So sorry about that, but I'll continue this conversation next week. So number three is to fix the leaky gut. So we fix the leaky gut with actually number one and number two because with the number one with the elimination diet, part of the elimination diet is not simply just to avoid things that can trigger some of the ADHD symptoms or make it worse. Part of it is also avoiding food that can make the leaky gut worse. And the second thing we do to improve the leaky gut is to add food back that helps to close the gap in the leaky gut. So it'll be like kind of part of number two, eating those healthy foods. Like again, definitely organ meat helps. And I know some of you don't like it, but just do the bone broth. Cook it with the At Whole Foods, you can buy a big chunk of bone or chicken feet and just use those to make broth that you use to make soup with, and then you'll get the benefit from that. Or if not, get the collagen. And then the other part, the number three step in healing the leaky gut is with a probiotic. So probiotic basically is the good bacteria that is in your intestine. And the reason why you want to have them in your intestine is because these probiotics, when they eat the food, the healthy food that you eat, they actually make brain chemicals that helps your brain calm down. Because there's a very direct connection between your gut and your brain. Um, so that's the reason why. And then number four is to reboot your brain. So you reboot your brain connection by exercise, certain type of exercise, um, meditation and yoga and things like that. So those are three and four. And like I said, I'm running out of time. So but maybe we can actually make that. I'm going to talk about step three and step four of the Eat to Focus in next Saturday. So then that way I have more time to talk about it, but because it's really interesting. So, but anyway, I have to go today because COVID call because someone in the family has COVID, so I have to go. So sorry to make it short today, but I'll be back next week. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for all your love and support here, and I love you all. Okay, bye. Thank you. Bye. See you all next week.